Yo,
Hey everyone.
we're back.
Thanks for being patient with us
While
as
we
we
figure out-
figured it out.
Yeah, and Patrick and I have the exact same position right now, same pose, just
Mhm.
cavalier.
How do you even know we're in the same room?
You wouldn't.
No.
You wouldn't. This is all stageable.
And it feels good to be back
It's
in
not like
the studio.
He's sitting right here next to me. He's gonna bite my hand.
Ooh.
All right, we're back with another episode of Fate Boys, and just like every single episode these days, we don't even know what we're talking about,
Which makes it really exciting this time since it's been a minute. Appreciate all of you who are tuning in. We love our loyal fans, friends, and family.
Anyone who's checking this out, we appreciate you. And let's get into it. All right. So you
Ian's
said
turn
you
today.
pulled for
Yep.
last time. Okay. So I will pull from the Jar of Fate. Dun dun dun. Let's see. Let's get in there. Just pick. Why would I pick the first one? That'd be so foolish.
You gotta like get underneath.
You gotta feel it.
Mhm.
Okay, this one's calling to me. All right, we'll talk about
Makes it that much more exciting. What do you got, Ian?
the nature of God.
Ooh, just some light reading.
Light reading. All right.
Feeling it?
Yeah, you feeling it?
I'm feeling it.
Let's do it. All right. Nature of God.
Yeah, nature
We
of God.
also control our own fate. So if we don't like what it is and we're not really feeling called to it, you know what? Why are here? It's our cast. We do what we do what we want.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the nature of God. All right. Let's take a second. Oh, we're going in, aren't we, Patrick?
And what feels right is coming at it from our own personal stance on what God is, instead of trying to navigate like
we're not preaching. We're not here to preach. We're not here to tell anybody what to believe. We are not here to exalt an agenda. This cast was designed for us to have these deep and meaningful and playful and fun and kooky and quirky and nerdy
explore together
and explore these conversations of a bunch of different topics. And so that's why we should definitely go through and add more and call some things from previous ideas that we threw in there. Anyway,
I mean, that's a heavy hitter for coming back after a little hiatus.
Going from grief to the nature of God. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I love it. Okay.
Love it.
So
I got my non-alcoholic Corona that is treating me right now, which is quite nice.
So Ian, do you have anything that immediately arises in you when you think about God and what that nature of that presence might be? Is it a presence to you? Yeah.
So the first thing, I'll go with what initially hit me when I saw that, is an act of God. So we just recently had a ton of hail damage hit our house and our cars. And when we were filing
your taxes,
our insurance claim, it's something that's considered an act of God. So it's something that you're not liable for because you didn't mess up your house or your car. You didn't take a pitchfork and start banging off of the hood.
It's something. You have a pitchfork?
I do, actually. I won it through an Auction Ninja.
Of course you do.
For like $5.
Ian's been on an Auction Ninja bender, everyone.
If you don't know what Auction Ninja is, let me tell you. So Auction Ninja, as a total aside, a non sequitur, is this online auction and estate sale site that gives you the ability to bid on pitchforks amongst other things, estate sales and auctions that are happening that people put up online. So it's kind of like the hybrid of like Craigslist and eBay, where it's local things to you. It's one area, so it's like one estate sale per thing, and you could bid on multiple ones. But anyway, you can find some gems on there, and I have just been on one lately, going on Auction Ninja, and like every weekend we've been going and picking up stuff that I've quote unquote won the bid on or purchased. And so one of those things that I got was a set of tools. So shovels, pitchfork kind of thing, trowels, and snow shovels, and pickaxes, and a ton of gardening tools for like $25 for the lot. So there's just a wall of tools, and they just took a photo of the wall and said like tools. Put a bid on it. And I'm like, I don't know, $5. And so I was bidding back and forth with someone, and I got all of them for $25. The sticker was still on the snow shovel for $19.99.
Dang.
So I got a $20 snow shovel with all the other tools for $25. Anyway, so it's just, I'm obsessed. Hashtag I'm in my 30s. and it's just amazing. So yeah, I absolutely love Auction Ninja. And
Mm-hmm.
if you are a fan of good deals and want to find some cool stuff, you just got to sift through some things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a search function. You don't have to go. You can actually like look for stuff. They had a
Nice.
PS4
Ooh,
for
nice.
$20.
Wow.
I don't know what the ending
Right. What the
sale of was.
condition
No,
and
no, it was like
wow.
it turns on and everything works, but it was like a PS4 for $20. So
Incredible.
just saying, like
All
you
right.
can find some cool stuff on there.
All right.
Anyway, so that's how I got a pitchfork, was
Mm-hmm.
through Auction
Uh-huh.
Ninja.
Uh-huh.
But I was filing my insurance claim, and it's this thing called Act of God. And so it's an interesting thing because in our country, we have this thing where we have the separation of church and state, but we have in God we trust on our money and Act of God in our insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's like permeating the litigation
well, even
and
the American, like how our country was established was
Mhm.
from people fleeing the United States of America, I should say, to clarify. America is the continent. The United States of America was founded through people who were fleeing religious persecution. So it's actually about in search of being able to practice whichever religion you see fit,
Mhm.
of how you connect with your faith. So it's interesting how like right now in the political climate, like white nationalism and Christianity are kind of getting this loud roar that's very prominent in the news, at least.
Yeah.
But there are so many different religions and different versions of God
Mhm.
that exist in this country. It's
Mhm.
not just, it's under one God, it's in God we trust,
Mhm.
right? And that can mean a multitude of different things depending on your religious beliefs or depending on how you interpret God. So
Mhm.
the nature of God to me is interesting. So when I hear that, what I initially thought of was like the act of God in
Mhm.
insurance, but something you can't really plan for. But the nature of God, they say in a lot of writings and Bible, it's omnipresent, always there. There seems to be this kind of elf on a shelf mentality of
Mm.
like always watching Big Brother,
Mhm.
kind of, at least within Christian Catholicism
Mhm.
faith. That's the only thing I've ever had any personal touch with. I've had light dabblings with Buddhism and light dabblings with Taoism. But I grew up Christian, so I definitely know
Right.
much more about that
Me too.
fundamentalist
Yeah.
belief. So take that with a grain of salt as far as this conversation is concerned. But they talk about it being omnipresent, always there, always with you. So that would be my first initial answer to that question. How about you?
Like you, I was raised from a young age in Christianity, but I never got on board, even when I was young, with like God being a male figure. I just
Santa in the clouds.
right.
Yeah.
I always thought of God as a power, as a divine power, omnipresent, omnipotent, and in general, always thought of God as this divine benevolent force. It wasn't until maybe my final years in Christianity when people were really like, you're going to get punished if you don't believe certain things and if you don't
Yeah.
uphold a certain rigor of, be it the 10 Commandments or the
That's the
golden
Big
rule,
Brother thing.
whatever
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
more dogmatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when I really started to ask questions that the church couldn't answer, and that's when I started to branch out and explore. I always knew that
How old were you
at that point,
when you were asking questions?
when I was asking questions, probably like 9 or 10.
Okay.
And then it got much more, my questioning really got more intense when I went into high school, and that's when I really stopped going to church regularly. It was still a part of
Your family life, yeah.
family life and school and whatnot. But when I went to college, shocker, got into Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Islam, all the good stuff, and started to
Well,
really
what do they call those? There's a name for them. There's like Judaism, Buddhism,
Abrahamic
yeah,
religions.
but there's like of the book or something like that. I can't remember the name of it.
People of the book.
There's something related to, because they are Abrahamic.
Uh-huh.
How'd you pronounce that?
Abrahamic or Abrahamic.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's a tether between them.
Mm-hmm.
Like it comes from the same branch
Yeah.
or the same tree.
Yes.
Like so those are different branches of the same tree where you
Mhm.
have different religions that have different deities, like Hinduism and
When you say different deities, you mean like polytheistic
sure, or like you also have
spiritualities?
yeah. You also have like indigenous cultures that
Mhm.
have their own religious that have like the big tortoise that came
Mhm.
from the sky and delivered our people, on its back, and that's how humanity was created. So the creationism,
Avatar?
yeah, creationism stories, they all have these different. That's an episode,
Yeah. The lion turtle?
bro. I
Yeah.
want to go in that.
You want to
That's
have a spiritual experience? You
we
watch
we
the
should we
lion
should
turtle
we should
episode.
we should definitely
Is that going in the
just.
jar?
I mean, that should just be
Avatar?
an episode, just like the way
Yeah.
that we did Dune.
Yeah.
We should do one on
I
Avatar,
agree.
The Last Airbender,
I
because
agree.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with Appa.
Yeah,
Just,
man.
just in
How could
case.
you not be?
He's my spirit animal. I fucking love Appa.
Dude, going into college was my first time really getting into a non-white spirituality too.
I mean, I grew up in Boulder,
Yeah.
so very Buddhist. So there's like a
Mm-hmm.
huge Buddhist influence because they have the
Mm-hmm.
Shambhala Center there.
And multiple types of Buddhism too,
Mhm.
like
Oh yeah.
Tibetan Buddhism, Mahayana, Theravada.
Interestingly enough, all white. So
True.
there's definitely like
There's
a
that
white
too.
flavor.
Yeah.
Like flour and salt,
Mm-hmm.
as far as flavors
Uh-huh.
are concerned.
Big
But there's
Zen presence out here too.
yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely I had a little bit there's that, and there's obviously Christianity. But growing up here, I was definitely exposed to that kind of Eastern style of philosophy in
Mhm.
religion, which that's the thing I like about Buddhism and Taoism is they're more of a philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism has more tenets, I would say, than Taoism
Yeah.
does. But is definitely more of the same thing with Judaism, honestly, is it's much more philosophical than it is like rote dictation of
Right.
like you follow this and you do this to the letter. Don't wear white after Labor Day and da 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 da.
Mhm.
It's much more like, well, what do you think that means when you read this in the Torah, or when you hear this? What do you think? How do you interpret that as you understand the world? And then you talk to somebody who has sage wisdom associated with all the texts, who's done all the studies, and they ask way more questions than just tell you what to do.
Yeah.
It's
And
like
a
a good
lot of those
therapist.
old texts, if you really get into them, be it the Quran or the Torah, the Talmud, what have you, it demands multiple angles of study and your own, like you said, it puts the onus on you to
Right.
really digest it
As
and
it
make it yours.
Right, as it should be, in my opinion. And like I also the biggest issue that I have with a lot of mainstream Christianity is the whole and I promise this podcast isn't going to be just about shitting on Christianity.
Well, if that's what you're feeling,
but my feeling about it is like the not do as I say, but say as I do, or the don't do as I say, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of the Jesus take the wheel kind of aspect in mainstream Christianity.
It's like a cop out.
And I say mainstream Christianity because I know some Christians who are personal friends of mine
Absolutely.
who are very, very kind, who actually are living
They're
that.
living it.
They're living it, and it's a different way. But like when you see it as a generalized view, I see that far too often where it's just people pass the buck, so to speak. They're just like pass it off on God, and they don't really have any agency.
God wills it.
Yeah. If God wills it, his will be done. I was meant to be broke. I was meant to be in this situation because God willed it. There's a lot of like.
I noticed you just brought up something really interesting. I saw a fork between sort of that manifest destiny of God wills it, and then also on the other side of that pendulum, the victim mentality.
And that's what I'm really speaking to. It's more about people who are like in a victimhood type of situation. Why me? Mea culpa.
God did this.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily blaming God,
right?
It's more about like they're blaming their situation on a third party stance rather than taking their own actions into account. One of an allegory from I think it's the Bhagavad Gita. I don't remember which one. So I
really want to explore that one. I never got around to that one yet. I've heard it's magnificent.
Arjuna all day. So I think it's the Bhagavad Gita, but I'm not remembering specifically. So I'll have to go and look it up. But the story goes, there is this person, he's on a boat and he's, in a storm and a lot of people drown and he's like stranded on this boat and he's praying to God to save him. And another boat comes by. I think he's on a raft.
Yeah.
This is
Clinging to life
this
on the open
is
sea.
totally
I
just
know
broad
this
strokes
story. Yeah,
recovery
yeah.
of the story. I'm obviously getting facts wrong, but in this retelling, it's just broad strokes. Anyway, so
Mhm.
he's on a raft. He gets stranded. He's a shipwreck.
God
And
save me. God
God save
save
me,
me.
please save me. And a boat comes by.
Hey man, you
Hey
need any
man, you
help?
need help. He's like, no, God will save me. And then like, uh, an, an eagle lands or something, just like three different
Multiple
instances,
rounds.
multiple rounds of things coming into his sphere, where if
Mhm.
he were to have taken his own situation into account, would have ended differently. And so he ends up perishing,
Mhm.
dying on this boat, and gets to heaven, and he's met at the pearly gates, and he's just like, God, I was praying for you to save me, why didn't you save me? He's like, bro, I sent you like a boat, I sent you this pigeon or whatever, like, all the different things. He's like, I was tossing you lifelines constantly, like, you just didn't take any of them.
Mhm.
And I think, to me, that is where that agency comes into play, because I'm not a full on atheist either. Like, I believe in something.
Mhm.
I lean agnostic. I don't really know what to believe.
And I feel like you personally are able to lead a spiritual, noble existence without needing to know the answer.
I mean, it'd be nice. I mean,
Of
I think
course,
that's
of
what
course,
everyone wants, to have that
of
kind of
course.
assurity. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I'm smart enough to really look at and delineate between the things as I see them,
Mhm.
and really just have been exposed to enough things where I'm just like, I don't really buy that hook, line, and sinker, just
Yeah.
like full bore. I like, there's some nuance there,
Mhm.
and I think the answer is way fucking bigger than any of us can really put into words. And so when people are like, "Oh yeah, I have it figured out. There's this thing in the sky. We all go up there. We have pina coladas, and it's great, and we're with your loved ones for forever." I'm
Mm.
like, I don't know.
No.
I think there it's more than that. I think it's better than that. I think
Mhm.
it's way better than that. Whatever it is,
Mhm.
if it is even anything, it's like we came from nothing. We go to quote unquote nothing, but that nothing after and before, what is that? And I think that that's really where people get hung up, is like the
Yeah.
not knowing of the nature of that particular thing. We're talking
Mhm.
about like end of life, beginning of life, those types of things. But the nature of God, I think when I hear the nature, what I think about first is temperament.
Mm.
And I think that you had mentioned it earlier when you had said that there's this benevolent nature. And in the Old Testament, very, very wrathful, very like, do as I say, or I'm going to fucking smite you.
Mhm.
Right. So there's definitely a smitey aspect from the religious
Smitey.
doctrine.
That's Ian 2024, everybody.
Smitey. So there's the smitey aspect of God, and then there's the benevolent, like
Mhm.
loving, caring, hold you,
New Testament version.
right. And that's, again, Christian based. There's a lot of we have Vishnu and Shiva and all the different, the patron saint of lost souls. There's like so many different versions of what people would refer to as God. But when we're talking about the energy, or this idea, the way that I now refer to it in my colloquialism when I'm speaking about quote unquote God, is I say the all that is.
Hmm.
I think it is pretty well encapsulating. Like, again, it gets to that omnipresent idea, and I think the power of it, or whatever it is too immense, and so it's all that is.
Mhm.
So it's the all that is, and the power of that, I think, can be wielded in such a way where people could misconstrue that as ego.
Say more.
I think a lot of people will have either a God complex, where
Uh-huh.
they think that they have the manifest destiny, the idea, like the power of
The
now,
charismatic cult leader.
the secret, like this kind of idea, the charismatic cult leader, or this, like, the idea that you are taking these things into account, ye yourselves be gods,
Mhm.
right? That's direct quote from the Bible, from Jesus. And I think what he's trying to waken people up to is that self-agency. While you are part of a bigger fold. And so I've always appreciated the idea of looking out for the other in most religions, of looking out for the weaker, looking out for the sick, looking out for the elderly, looking out for the disenfranchised, looking out for people who aren't having as good of a go. Your
Mhm.
neighbor, in the commandments, is like, look after your neighbor, right? And that idea of really trying to inspire people to have these altruistic and positive responses to a bigger life question of
Mhm.
like, what is the meaning of life? Why are
Mhm.
we here? What's the point? And to me, the definition of that is to experience it. We're here to experience it. And in that experience, trying to find a neutral positive, which is where I got that from Buddhism.
A neutral positive.
Which is, it's basically being, you have no like high swinging joys or no low bearing lows. Everything's just kind of middle road, but with a smile.
Yes.
And it's like, that's well kind of the idea of, you're trying to strike this, like, things are neutral, but with a smile, just slightly like a little plus sign, you know, where it's like, it's okay. And you're feeling good about it.
Yeah. When you think of, when you mention the high highs and the low lows, I think of back on the benevolence, malevolence aspects of God that we've been sort of dancing around. And when I say benevolent, like whatever God force exists as benevolent, I think of it when I think nature is benevolent. You know, a lion is
nature is brutal.
Right. And I think
so say more. Yeah.
Right. So I think that a lot of people, myself in the past, would get hung up on, well, how can God be all good when there's all this brutality in the world? But then
kids get murdered. How do you say God's all good?
Yeah. Totally. I think what helps me resolve that paradox, or at least live with it, is when I think back on what you mentioned earlier, which is the all that is. And life, even in its pure Edenic state, if you will.
I love that, Edenic.
Right? There's blood
it's
and
also
claw.
my wife's name, Eden. It makes me feel happy. Anyway, continue.
Even in the Garden of Eden, there is blood and claw and death and the cycles of life and volcanic eruptions and seismic movements of chaos on the earth, and human beings having a subjective experience. We can look at that and be like, wow, this is awful, or like, wow, this is a cycle of nature.
Right.
How can we live with it and adapt to it? And we were born from it, and we will die unto it. You know?
Yeah, I think what you just said there is fairly profound, and if people haven't thought about it in that way, I think that could be a really big aha moment, which is, everything in your life is based on your perspective. Full stop, like 100%. So anything that you're experiencing right now, that is based on how you perceive it. That's based on your subjective reality. Because what is considered positive to a small field mouse is not considered positive to a jaguar. You know, what's considered positive for a mountain to erupt so that way it relieves the pressure is not positive to the people living below that now have to deal with all the lava flow, right? So it's all subjective. Depending on the side of the street you're standing, you can call something else. This is amazing psychological experiment, or it was just like a general experiment, I should say, where they had a volleyball that was painted white on one side and painted black on the other. And it was completely split directly in the middle. So when I'm looking at it from one side, all I see is white. And when you're looking at it from your side, all you see is black. And the study, or the thought, was to sit across from someone and describe what you see and try to convince them of what you see is real. And people would get so pissed, like, you're fucking with me, right? Why are you saying it's black? It's clearly white. Like, what the hell is wrong with you, right? So people would start taking it personally.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to be manipulated. And then the study would break, and then they would switch sides, and they would look at it, and they would all laugh and like put their head in their hands, you know, and be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But it's a really good test to speak to, like, they're both right. And it's just based on your perspective. So what you just said, taking that a step further, and this is the big aha moment for people, is none of it really matters. Nothing matters. But by that token, everything matters. Because I learned this from this organization called the Landmark Forum, which I have mixed feelings about. But one thing I took away from it positively was this statement, which is, humans are meaning-making machines. Meaning that nothing in life matters. Inherently. It just is. So when a volcano goes off, a house burns down, it just is. And we have the opportunity as humans to make meaning out of our lives and out of our experiences. So what that allows you to do is to be...
I mean, you're constructing a reality.
You really are. And we're doing that all the time. But we're doing it subconsciously. And
Mm-hmm.
so what this allows you to do, and this is why it's an aha moment, is to really be aware that you are choosing to have that as a response, even though there are some things that when you hear them, like, that's horrible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, you can't tell someone like who just got diagnosed with cancer or something like,
Choose a
hey,
better
yeah,
perspective.
exactly, you're an asshole for
Mm-hmm.
saying that. And I don't think anyone really holds that opinion either. But at the end of the day, if you can take 6 steps back, it just is. It is just a thing. And yes, your response to it is 100% accurate, and everyone gets to choose how they respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a choice, and it is a thing that you are choosing to imbue over a situation where you are making meaning out of something, or choosing to have a response to it, which I always really loved as well when I was younger and I was getting bullied or teased, or people were making fun of me, or I was feeling self-conscious,
Mm-hmm.
or any of those things, is you don't have control over what people will say or what
Mm-hmm.
people will do. All you really truly have control over is your response to it.
Mm-hmm.
You 100% do. So you can choose to retaliate. You can choose to let it roll off your back. You can choose to
Do nothing.
do nothing and just cry at home, you know? So it's like there's a lot of different response actions, but ultimately you are in control of that. And so if you can flex that muscle, just like training in the gym, and you can flex really allowing the stuff that exists outside of your direct control to just kind of float by. That's why
Mm-hmm.
meditation's so powerful,
Mm-hmm.
to not be attached to the thoughts. You'll really find this inner peace in other situations where you would normally be like incited.
Knocked off your center.
Oh, bro.
Yeah.
Like, the only area that really fucks with me that way these days is traffic.
Uh-huh.
Driving.
Yeah.
People who drive in the left lane, I want to slaughter them. They drive like 5 under the speed limit in the left. I just can't. It drives me up a fucking wall. But that's a choice.
Yeah.
I'm choosing that. I'm choosing that anger and that irate response.
I think there's 2 aspects of God that could be explored right now, just in that example of traffic. Yeah. So something that's coming up for me in this moment is externally, my experience of God outside of my person are the things that I don't have control over. So like that which I must adapt to, that which is.
You consider that God.
It's one aspect of God.
Okay, continue.
And then
I love this.
My inner subjective experience of God inside is my responsiveness, my capacity for sovereignty to adapt to the world I see in front of me.
And so what is that? Try to summarize that as a statement of God again.
I'm seeing the inner and the outer experience of God.
So the outer experience is the things that are happening outside of your control that you have to adapt to, and then the inner experience of God is.
So when you say act of God, that's like an outer thing coming across
no
your
control,
path,
just
no
happened.
control over
Right.
it. It's not we don't need to see every little thing outside of us as oh, that's God. Wow.
That's
not what I'm
making
saying.
machines.
Yeah,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Some people do. They
That right
really
there.
take it to that level where
Yeah.
they're just like, they brought me cinnamon instead of coriander. That's God telling me something. I'm like, no, the wait staff just fucked up.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. I want to take it a little deeper too, because I feel like there's more here.
Go.
Something that's been really exciting to me, more of a hermetic understanding of God, which is if we really dig into that statement that you quoted from the New Testament, ye yourselves be gods. When I think inside myself, how would I want God to be? You know, how would I want God to be treating me and then treat myself that way?
That's such a powerful
response.
Yeah.
And like if God is learning what it means to be human through a human being, it's not like God is all knowing and humans are the ones that are fucking up. You know, it's like, no, God is living through you, understanding moment to moment what it is to be you. You being you are informing God with a capital G, the all that is, what it's like to be Ian, what it's like to be Patrick.
100%. I love that.
And so like the God force is learning with you, even though there is no separate you.
I got a question
right?
for you
Yeah.
that kind of goes off that. And it works in our favor because of the name of our podcast is where does fate fall into that?
Ooh. Okay. So I love what we talked about in our first episode, which fate is like the cards that you were born with in your hand. And it's that
And
sort of
destiny's how you play them.
Yeah. And I really, really like that. because I think about my own life, and I was definitely born with a certain blueprint of potentials of what kind of person I am to be. And yet within that blueprint, there are so many ways that I could express that.
Sure.
So these are the paints that I was given to paint my canvas with. I've got these reds, these blues, these greens, these
Of
yellows.
course, you'd use painting as an
Right?
analogy.
Right? I had to,
Artist.
but I can make a Jackson Pollock style. I could go Alex Gray with this mofo. I could, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that's enough agency for me to lead a meaningful life and feel like I can individuate,
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to do that, and I think it's nicer to have that response when things are going positively.
That's a really great fine print there, because I was born with a certain amount of privilege, a certain like ability,
Samesies.
and I can only imagine
Just
how
even the time period we're born in.
that too.
I was born in 85, so I grew up in the 90s during in the United States, which was in an economic surplus. So we were doing great.
I was born in 91.
And I'm white in America in an area that wasn't poor. Like
we have a specific experience in that.
So it was pretty good. I didn't come from abject poverty. Like I wouldn't say we were rich, growing up. And both of my parents grew up poor. So it's like I was seen by how they carried it. I got to see their modeling of how they lived a life, having that as their blueprint, right? To like try to provide for your family to make that life better, which is interesting in our generation, because we're technically the first generation to not do better than our parents historically in human history.
Ooh, that's a reality check.
Fucking crazy.
Wow.
So like as long as the United States has been around, I'll caveat that with a huge asterisk, right? Based on the 400 plus whatever years that we've been a thing, right? Every generation that they did better than their parents.
Wow.
Every single one, except ours. We're the first one where that graph dipped and started dropping back down due to economic concerns and other things.
Yeah, like our parents definitely had houses by the time
they were in their 20s.
Yeah.
I just got here and I'm almost 40.
Yeah.
Just got here.
Yeah.
And it's a pipe dream for people in our generation.
What a reality check.
Most people are just, they'll forever will rent, and they're working a job that they just seemingly can't get out from under the thumb of it. I
mean, and that's interesting too that you bring that up, because I think about the cards that we've been dealt in our generation and where we're at right now in 2024, and how do we want to adapt to that?
Yeah.
How do we want to work with that
canvas? Changing. And that's the other thing too, is like the benefit of being the generation that broke the mold of saying we need to do this differently is
can't do business as usual.
Right. So the pro of that is we get to hearken in this new age.
Did you just say Harkonnen?
Yes.
Baron Harkonnen?
No. Definitely not. Harkonnen.
Dune round 2 is coming.
I know. We're going to do it.
It's coming.
We're going to Dune it.
Ooh.
The puns are happening. Ooh. It's good.
You're going to be such a great dad.
Thank you. They're going to hate me. I love it. They're going to be rolling their eyes in the back of
You
the
have
car.
At least 13 years before they start hating you.
Temporarily. It depends. It's going to be one of those things, because I like to cook, right? So they're either going to be the type of kid that has such a well-defined palate as a kid.
Oh, for sure.
They're going to appreciate.
Oh, yeah.
Or they're going to be like, oh,
chicken
Dad,
fingers every day.
I just want Oreos. Can you not make me like ube pancakes? Like I can't anymore with your culinary stuff. Like it's probably going to be one or the other. Like they're either going to be so sick of the fact that I can make them like this high-end stuff, and they just want like Tyson McNuggets. Like they just want a fucking
Dino Nuggies.
They just want a fucking Pop-Tart.
We enjoy those every now and then.
You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where it's like they just want the poison. Even though
you can rest assured, Ian, that I will be the cool uncle that will let them know how cool their parents are.
I sure hope so. Yeah, it's one of those things too, because you need people in your life. That's a whole other episode of like people who aren't your parents.
Who can mentor you from the side.
They will tell you the exact verbatim thing that your parents said, but you were like, no, Mom and Dad, I'm never. And then somebody else tells you, you're like, oh, that sounds pretty good. That sounds like sage advice. And then your parents are over there banging their head against the wall being like, I've been telling you this since you were 6, child. Anyway. don't even, where were we?
Well, we can just hit it from a different angle. I
Diverged.
mean,
We're talking about fate and how it kind of interwoven into like nature and the way that we respond to things.
I just really, really love the juiciness of the idea that God is on the ground with us, learning how to live life through us.
Yes, that's where we were. Thank you.
We're not like some fallen beings that are just effing up every step of the way. It's like, no, we are the greatest evolutionary experiment.
I mean, that's getting into some territory too, because we could start talking about the
Anunnaki. What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, just the way that we might have been engineered instead of evolved naturally. That's a whole other question, because it's like you think about human history and how there's a good chunk of missing data, you know, and we're like, we could have already done this and now we're doing it again, or it was supplanted, like the whole alien.
We were seeded.
Yeah, we were seeded on the planet, you know, and it was kind of presented for us, and that's where Eden came from, like the idea of
that terraformed playpen,
beautiful thing you're dropped in here.
Yep.
And then stuff started spinning.
Yeah, and that's also
centrifuge.
For those that didn't know, that's a very pre-Christian and pre-Abrahamic myth. This Garden of Eden is a Sumerian story. It's a Zoroastrian story.
Well, when you get into the different cultures, and when they all have an event, like a flood, right? That's a big one. Like when they all in their history, you go to these tribes,
a globe cleansing natural
and you're like
disaster,
okay. And then you're like, okay, Noah, like that you're talking about the same time period, same thing in history. That happened. So there was a flood that transpired. We know that the earth was covered at a certain point.
There is scientific geological evidence that a huge flood covered the planet.
Right. So it's like, okay, this happened, right? Yeah. And they have these concepts of these mountains that they were actually trees. Now we're getting into like really out there.
You just made my hair stand up.
Yeah. So you people think it's a mountain, right? But it looks like the roots of a tree. The stump, and it looks like it was kind of like halved.
Tree?
Yeah, basically. Whoa. And so there's this theory. These are all just theories.
Yeah. We're going there.
That there were like giants, like we were bigger, and these things were massive. Then you start thinking about Goliath. You start thinking about Titans.
The Nephilim.
You start thinking about these things, and you're like, okay, well, there's stories that kind of back this up. Statues that back this up. Different tribal wisdom of passed down through generation to generation that back up these like large entities. So I don't know, there's something there. I don't know what that is, you know, but it's just like there's conspiracy theories are fun to like just tease at, you know, just like pull the thread and just kind of like look into it. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
That I've gotten such a wonderful experience of going to all these different ancient stories from different cultures and just being in awe of the similarities, whether those stories be from, you know, Mayan tablets or Sumerian tablets. It's awe-inspiring.
What was the one that said that there was a calendar that 2012 was supposed to be the end of the world?
That's the Mayan calendar. But that one's tricky because the Mayan calendar wasn't saying that the world is going to be cleansed by fire or apocalypse or anything. It's just like the changing of a certain larger calendrical period of time.
Right. No, exactly. You know? It was just like the end of their time.
Don't get me wrong. There were paradigm shifts associated with that changing of the times, but it wasn't like the world's going to end.
Right. And that's where all these cataclysmic like movies and stuff are coming from.
That was a time in our lives.
Yeah.
Dennis Quaid.
Oh, right? There's so many of those movies.
That was not a good movie.
No. No. Sorry. 2012 was not great.
Sorry if you enjoyed it.
It was not good. What was the other one? Like 2 days after tomorrow.
Oh, the day after tomorrow.
Yeah. Like 2 days. They had a South Park episode that made fun of it.
2 days after tomorrow.
2 days before the day after tomorrow. That's today. Like, and yeah, it's hilarious. That movie was so. I enjoyed it when I saw it, but it was. I'm sure if I would have been back and rewatched it, it would not hold up. Anyway,
no. How do you? So this is making me want to ask about how do you feel about apocalypse? Maybe not Revelations. We don't need to go down that. But how do you feel humanity plays into evolution? If there was a God, and if that God had a plan for like the
Mm,
evolution of the planet,
sure.
do you think we're fucking that up? Do you think that
Well,
we have
this
a
is
place in it?
yeah. Well, this is kind of where I get to when the back to the all that is and the whole concept of like nothing really matters. Is it's like it just is,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Like people want to and kind of going against directly against what I was saying earlier of like just passing the buck and saying it doesn't matter, you have no agency, none of that stuff,
Nihilism.
yeah, that kind of thing. Um, I think you should always try. I think you should always look for the good and try to live in a righteous manner. Fight for the things that you see as having an altruistic or higher thing than you. The idea of planting a tree that you'll never be able to sit in
Mm-hmm.
the shade of is that kind of mentality, legacy, just of having just because you aren't going to benefit from it. I see so much of what's happened in our country as far as leveraging the future generations for comfort and benefit now
Ah, mm-hmm.
that has fucked up so much.
Totally.
And it's like that's why millennials can't buy a house. That's why like our deficit is in
I
shambles.
mean, that's absolutely true. And we're not really cultivating vision of what we want
I know
for as a
it's
people,
just more of the
as a
same.
society, as a culture, as a species.
Yeah. And I think part of that is the lack of spirituality. So
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm all over the board here, and
That's okay. I love that.
me too. I love that aspect of myself. I love the fact that I don't fit into just a very clean box
Mm-hmm.
because it sounds like part of me is very like leftist, liberal, fight for other altruism, things that are better for the planet, things that are better for our people.
You're
Um,
such a boulderite.
and then simultaneously, I'm saying you have agency. Stop whining. Don't be a victim. Pick yourself up. And like we should have some sense of self accountability, and we have a responsibility to manage that in our lives. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's not just like a one size fits all approach either.
Yeah. And I think that ties into the nature of God really well because it's very paradoxical to even approach the subject. And I mean, even Einstein coined the phrase that the level of a person's intelligence is their capacity to hold paradox without fragmenting by by confusion or the enormity of
You
an
need to be
unresolved
right.
existential
You
issue.
need to be able to hold that paradox true to be able to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that I'm often one in that situation where I have conflictual beliefs where you would think because I believe this, that means then
Right.
I
You
believe
must
that
swing this way
you
then.
you must believe this as well. And I'm like, I'm kind of in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of go both. I go both, and people are like, no, you have to choose a side. I'm like, there's no sides.
Right.
It's the misstep is I think people have this idea where you have to. I don't know. There are instances where you do have to make a tough choice and
Yeah.
go one way or the other. You can't just live at a crossroads. You have to walk down a path.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that's a matter of virtuous living,
I think so too.
like
Is it?
standing for truth.
Yeah, and truth has become such a subjective term
Oh my.
in the age of
My
spin.
truth.
Dude, in the age of spin, like what do you actually know? I very rarely take anything. I've been bamboozled enough times where unless it's lived experience, my first
Yeah.
response is what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
When I hear something, hey, these people broke into da da da, I'm like, but did they? And it seems like I'm being an asshole,
No.
but I'm like, the first thing that I do now is question it
Uh-huh.
because I have been fed so much bullshit through different narratives and media sources and everything, and I've been completely tricked and thought something and regurgitated it, and I was completely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the age of deep fakes.
Dude, you can say some stuff and be like, hey, did you know the Pope's gay? And you're like, I was so ready for that. I was like, yes, let this be true. Like shared it on Facebook. It was like, hell yeah. And then I looked into it. I'm like, it's a fake article. Damn it. That's a legit.
Not even the Onion.
That's a legit example.
Wow.
I was so ready for that. I was just like, take that Christianity for all of you homophobic people who think that, this is a choice. It is people love who they love, get over yourself. Even the Pope, the person who speaks to God for you, is that. And obviously it was fake, but I was so ready. And that's so true. That feeling and that sensation, I think, is so true for people. Like, we want to be right. They want to go to imright.com and then find. That's why when people are like, I have all these statistics and all this stuff to prove my point, I'm like, I can go to imright.com also and go find my own facts and find my own statistics that proves my exact narrative to the opposition of what you're talking about. And so, interestingly enough, in this climate, what I've taken to start doing now is when I have a belief on something, I go and try to prove myself wrong first. I want to go and see if I can prove the other thing accurate, because then now you're talking about the same thing of like, can you hold a paradox in your brain? Because in some cases, both are true.
Yeah.
And you have to really look into the specificity of it. And then you start pulling the thread of the conspiracy theories even further. But when it comes back to the nature of God and what it is, I think it just is. And I also feel like there's a responsibility that we carry because we've been given this gift of life. And this, if you look at it just from a biological perspective, we are a little bubble of stardust that just came into being and having this experience with the sentience and consciousness. How rare is that in the cosmos? Like, that doesn't just happen. Like, there is from a biological perspective of how it happens, but for all those pieces to line up for us, what they refer to as the Goldilocks zone for this planet to even exist.
Perfect amount of sun.
What? Are you kidding me? You know, that's enough right there just to be grateful, just to like walk with gratitude of like, wow, I get to be here. Awesome. You know, even when shit is popping off and you're just like not having a good go, all been there. You know, we've all had hard things to overcome and go through, even when we've been experienced to like a fucking boatload of privilege. And the worst thing that I've had to encounter with that is where people think that just because I have privilege doesn't mean that I haven't suffered,
right?
Or that I haven't
never experienced grief,
like I haven't gone through hard
never
things.
had loss.
You know what I mean? Like comparative suffering is always a hard game. But I recognize that, and I take account and acknowledge the privilege that I've been given, while simultaneously recognizing that I'm a human who's had my own experiences as well, and giving myself grace for that.
What makes you feel connection to your idea of God? Your understanding of God? What makes you feel connected to a deeper spirituality?
I think when I take a beat and I breathe and I'm in nature and I'm outside, or I'm more connected with the planet and connecting with myself, and I'm looking inward. I think I can see it when I look outward too. Like, you see like a sunset, or you see, you know, you're playing with your niece or your nephew and they're just like smiling back at you and they're having a great time or whatever. There's like moments like that. But I think as far as that question, when I take a beat and I like have my feet on the ground and I'm looking inward and I have my reflection of my external experience is in resonance and harmony with my internal authentic expression. Ooh. I think that where you find that harmony, that sweet spot in between, where the resonance is on point, that is it.
Beautiful.
That is where I experienced that. Beautiful. And I've been in moments in my life where those things were dissonant. They were completely out of sync. Where how I felt inside and how I saw myself was completely desperate from my current experience. And I'm like, you know, like times when I was dishonest, or times when I was not living a life that I saw as virtuous. You know, I saw myself as a virtuous person, but my life experience wasn't showing me that. I wasn't experiencing that.
God, that's hard.
You know? Yeah. And I think that disparate, that separation, that dissonance is really where the lack of God, or the lack of that connection to your spirituality, your truth.
Ooh, you know, moments of pain and suffering and out of alignment, as people like to say, those like cueing you in to the fact that there is a deeper possibility of living available to you.
There is a line to walk.
Yeah, there is a line to walk.
And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too. It's like, because if you're talking about if all things are God, then your goal for some people is to be evil, and to make them good is to actually throw them out of resonance with their true path, which is fascinating when you
Ooh,
start unpacking that,
there's a paradox.
because
Ooh.
that huge epicness, like Hitler is the
Uh-huh.
go-to for most people when you just think of
An example.
of evil,
Mm-hmm.
right? He was the most evil bastard he was born to be.
And
And
he
what
thought,
and he thought he was righteous and within
virtuous.
virtuous and doing all the things. And he was the best personification of himself in that lifetime. And he helped a lot of other people wake up to the horror of what that all could look like, and helped probably a lot of people shift course of, let's not have that be a reality. So when you think about like the value, quote unquote, is, it's like, yeah, the devastation, horrific, cannot even imagine, right? But was he living his authentic version of himself? Of he was brought in, when you're talking about the nature of God, was he incarnated to have that experience? Was that his contract? Was that the thing that he was supposed to have as his experience, and he was just fulfilling it? Versus everyone's supposed to be good, everyone's supposed to be perfect and have their little, like, corner of the world,
Homogenous.
have the same experience.
Uh-huh.
It's like, no, we're all very different. And I think that there are things of what we are supposed to do. And this is the thing about good and evil. We all have that inside of us,
Totally.
and you have to know when to play those cards, and like how to work with them. But to feel like you're just all good, or you're just all bad.
Man, I made that mistake back in the day in Christian upbringing. I thought that was the mold that I needed to fit into. But then as a result of trying to be like a good boy all the time,
Good Christian,
you get really out of touch with your physical earthly nature, and you lose the capacity to really have any gravity, to have any real power in your life, out of touch with your sexual forces, out of touch with anger, out of touch with the desire for just out of touch with desire and how to act on it and your will.
Yeah, I feel like you're also just completely out of touch. Like talking about like a volcano that needs to erupt.
Yes.
Yep. It's like that's the will, that is the nature. The nature of the volcano is to erupt. The nature of a lion is to, be on the prowl. I knew
you were going to say lion.
Yeah.
I knew that was coming in. Yeah.
They have an intrinsic nature. And I think that it's actually a really good representation for humans, because I think we're above nature.
Right.
We are beings here, and we all have our experiences, and we just have a multitude of ways to express it, more so than a dog or a lion or any of those things. But we all have the complexity to be able to, to be able to express ourselves in all of those different ways. And so it's about riding that wave and understanding what is authentic to you. And I think that that's the most important piece, as far as like as a takeaway from this, is your goal ultimately, my goal ultimately, is to be the best authentic version of me, to know all the bits and pieces, all the corners and edges, all the rough bits, all the positive stuff, all of it. Get comfortable with it, get acquainted with it. And I feel like a lot of people who are struggling with something like that is because they are unwilling, like you expressed, and same here when I was younger, you are repressing or putting something about your character, about your authentic self. You are forcing it into a closet. You're forcing it in on the back burner. You're forcing it out of sight, out of mind, into the subconscious.
And then it comes out sideways.
Absolutely. And the best thing you can do is to really get familiar and acquainted with all of those aspects of yourself. And so if you haven't explored those things, I would definitely recommend that people ask themselves those questions. And usually, if you are honest with yourself, wink, wink, everyone, take a minute and ask yourself, what parts of yourself are you not allowing that airtime? And I guarantee you there's something that initially hits, that's something that comes up, because it was very true for me. Like, what parts of yourself are you not allowing to see daylight? And it can be scary because it might be not a positive thing. It might be something shameful, but you need to acknowledge it and look at it and give it its time to breathe. Because if you don't, then it's just going to fester and grow and turn into
Work against you.
this monster. Whereas if you deal with it now, then it's just a minuscule thing that you don't have to give any power to, but it is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. So you have to give it its due that it exists. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to really have any sort of control over it.
Yeah. And a tie-in that says exactly that is if you go to the Essene scriptures, which are basically hidden papyri scrolls that were found in the Egyptian desert pretty recently. Whether you believe them or not, that they were actually a part of like the canon, there's a Gospel of Thomas, one of Jesus's
The
disciples.
doubting Thomas, the one and the same. Okay.
Yeah.
You doubt me, Thomas?
I could be wrong on that. I could be wrong. It could be a different Thomas, but as far as I know, it was the Thomas.
Okay.
Who was the only disciple to actually write down quotes of Yeshua, of Jesus. And the whole gospel is just Jesus said this, Jesus said that. And one of the most profound ones that gets quoted a lot, but I think it's very relevant to what Ian just said, is Jesus said, that which is within you, you must bring out of you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, that which is within you will destroy you.
Ooh.
And
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Queen.
And even in a therapy session I recently had, is those parts of me that I might be deeply ashamed of and it might be super prickly and not want to bring out of me. If I bring it out of me into the light, especially in a relational context, let alone just with myself,
yeah.
it actually has the capacity to be adaptive,
Yep.
to be relational.
Yep.
Even if it's messy,
Yep.
the people that truly love you will see it and feel where that comes from in your authenticity and be like, oh, that, maybe it's jealousy, maybe it's insecurity, but it actually comes from a deep care between me and someone in my life.
Yeah, you have to be open, you have to be honest, you have to be, I think a lot of people's internal struggles, and I've experienced this, so I'm not saying anything that I don't personally have experience with, comes from something that you're unwilling to acknowledge in yourself. And so you need to ask yourself, how am I not being authentically me? And I would get criticized for code switching. Are you familiar with the term?
Yeah, but I'm not confident in that one.
Sure, I'll break it down because it might be helpful for the audience as well. So the term code switching means that I would show up differently depending on the group of people I was with. And so when I would have a party with all those people, they would all know me as a very different version of myself, all genuine. And that's the other piece that was really interesting.
We saw Ian as the white ball. No, we saw Ian as the black side of the ball.
All very genuine to who I am, but it was very loudly one color. So perfect example is using color as an analogy. I was painting with red with one group. I was painting with green with one group. And if one person would be like, hey, is Ian red or green? They'd be like, oh, he's totally red. What are you talking about? And he's like, oh, what? Because he's green with us. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I am those colors.
All of them are true.
I was boldly painting with more of that color in different groups. And so what I had to, this is why being 30 in your 30s is great, because in your 30s, you get to let go of all that shit that you've tried to prove in your 20s, and you just get to be more authentically you. But at least that's been my experience and the experience of a lot of people.
Definitely feel myself coming into that and enjoying it more and more every day.
As you step in, because you're 32?
33 at the end of this month.
Right. Perfect. And I'm 38, going to be 39. So got a couple years on you. But my 30s have been great in that because I was able to relax and I don't need to prove anything anymore to anybody. I just am this. I am green. I am red. I'm purple. I'm sometimes chartreuse, and sometimes I'm gold, and sometimes I'm silver, and sometimes I'm black. Leave me the fuck alone. I am all those things. And if you're going to call me a color, that's limiting me so much to my human experience. And so now I'm more integrated. So when you see me, I'm much more like the rainbow
There it is.
oscillation on
There it
my
is.
mic right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is I paint with all these colors all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
you're now going to get a rainbow swipe as opposed to just a bold color.
Mm-hmm.
Generally,
I'm in my
with
blue
me,
period. It's fine.
it's okay.
It's fine.
You're figuring it out. Anything to wrap us up, Patrick?
I
Put a bow on it. Stick the landing. Here we go.
I love that Ian drew such a huge topic from the jar today, but I I felt, you can let me know if I'm totally off base here, but I felt like we were able to explore how are we living in relation to what we think the nature of God is? How do we feel God in our lives? And obviously, there's no way we could cover this in one episode,
Oh, go. No.
but I love the questions that we were asking. I love the territory that we explored together, and can't wait to do more juicy, deep topics like that.
Yeah, it was excellent. And that's kind of what I love about this podcast is we get to go into these things as kind of like bite-sized morsels. We're not trying to answer these questions.
No.
We're trying to explore these ideas and really try to look at what it could mean and what these things mean to us, and open up that conversation to our listener base and to see what you guys pulled from this. As what is anything that we touched on hit something with you? Like, does it strike a nerve, or does it really inspire you? Does it bring up a thought or a question that maybe you haven't really considered? Or is there something that we totally missed and that we're like, hey, you didn't even touch on this? And we might just write it down as a topic and throw it in the jar. So let us know what you think of this particular cast and any other of our casts. And we'd love to hear from you. And thanks for taking a listen, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Godliness is authenticity.
There we go.
Fate Boys out.